Hey everyone, it's Billy Carson, aka Forbidden Knowledge. Today I want you to welcome a very good friend of mine, best-selling author Andrew Collins. He's a science and history writer who investigates advanced civilizations in prehistory. He's also the co-discoverer of a massive cave complex at the Giza Plateau, now known as the Collins Cave. The author of several books, including Origins of the Gods and Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, he regularly appears on radio shows, podcasts, and TV series, including Ancient Aliens, The Unexplained with William Shatner, and Lost Worlds. He lives in England. Welcome to the show, my very good friend, Andrew Collins.
Looking at snakes, it seemed to be something similar was going on, certainly on a symbolic level. You had to be consumed by this snake. Even the pillar shrine itself seems to be a three-dimensional head of a snake. Rites were going on here where people were quite literally becoming possessed by a snake. They were delivering oracular communications, very similar to the oracle at Delphi. Right at the base are the stars surrounding something known as the galactic bulge. Now, the galactic bulge marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy.
For the people that are following our accounts and just maybe seeing you for the first time, tell them a little bit about what got you into ancient civilizations and what got you looking into these ancient mysteries.
As I mentioned, my background, I suppose, really goes back to reading books by Eric von Daniken. I was also into UFOs, the paranormal, so-called Earth mysteries, the idea of megalithic structures, being on ley lines and, some kind of lost technology or geometry associated with them. I mean, and then it sort of gradually evolved from there, really. The interest in Egypt heightened. And then in the mid-1990s, I wrote my first proper book. I mean, I'd written several books earlier than those, but those were sort of books on what we call psychic questing, gallivanting off around the landscape, hunting artifacts and solving mysteries and whatever. But my first proper book was From the Ashes of Angels that came out in 1996. And basically what this did was to look at all of the myths and legends relating to these mythical beings that brought civilization to the ancient world. I mean, we're talking about the Watchers of the Book of Enoch, and obviously their offspring, the Nephilim. We're talking about the Anunnaki of Mesopotamian tradition, and the way that they, were able to give the rudiments of civilization to the earliest city-states of Sumer and Akkad and the other civilizations, places like Iraq, and basically came up with the idea that this was a memory of some kind of shamanic elite or prime movers behind the Neolithic revolution in southeastern Turkey at the end of the last ice age. And I suggested that, this is where you would find evidence of this high culture that very clearly had pre-existed this time and probably went back to the time of the last ice age, and that may well have been wiped out in a civilization, in a catastrophe. So that was basically it. Now, what I didn't realize as I was writing this book, which by the way, became an international bestseller, it was in the Times bestseller list, is that the first spades were going into the ground at Göbekli Tepe. I mean, somewhere I had no knowledge of whatsoever until the year 2000, when there was a huge spread on Göbekli in a German magazine. And of course, I was alerted to that. And I thought, well, there you go. There's your smoking gun of this sort of lost civilization, if you like. And obviously, when I looked at the T-pillars there, I thought, this was so unusual, so strange, that there was absolutely no comparison with anything that you might find in Egypt or Babylon or the Indus Valley or China or whatever. It seemed to be absolutely unique. And of course, we know that Göbekli Tepe goes back to 9,600 BC. So a couple of years later, in 2002, From the Ashes of Angels was published in Turkey. And 2 years later, I was asked to lecture on it in southeastern Turkey basically saying that the Kurdish people were the sort of descendants of the founders of civilization, really. And during this time, I was given a driver and an interpreter to go to all of these sites, which I'd never been to before. I'd been to other parts of Turkey, but I'd not been to southeastern Turkey. So I went to Göbekli Tepe. I went to other sites like Haran in the area, the ancient astronomical tower there. And whilst I was at Haran, these kids came up to me and basically wanted to sell me this local tiny guidebook that was secondhand already. And so I looked at it and I gave them some money for it. And I turned to the back and there was reference to this place called Karahan Tepe, which had only just been discovered. And there was a picture in there of a T-shaped pillar, like the ones at Göbekli Tepe, but it had a snake crawling up the side of it. And it just looked really unusual. And I just thought, I've got to find this place. So 2 days later, I was back in the area, in the Tek Mountains, which is where Karahan Tepe is located, a very remote part of Turkey, quite close to the Syrian border. And nobody seemed to know where this place was. I'd never heard of it. But finally, we talked to this guy in full Arab dress on a tractor, and he just sort of pointed in a certain direction. And we came to this farmhouse, and this little boy came out, talked to our interpreter, and he just pointed southwards to this hill, a limestone hill. And so we walked towards it. And as we got closer, you could see stone tools on the ground. Now, at first, there were only a few, but as you got closer and closer to the hill, there were more and more, until eventually, around its base, there were thousands of them. And I've seen something similar at Göbekli Tepe, so I knew we were at the right place. I also knew that this site was clearly around 9,000 BC, something like that. So about 11,000 years old. But what I also saw on the ground were angled pieces of what considered to be porthole stones. And they looked like they'd come from some kind of medieval building, like a medieval Gothic building. I mean, they were so well done, and they were just lying about. But also, there were the heads of T-pillars just sticking up around everywhere. And it was quite clear that underneath this soil and rubble at the base and at the side of the hill was some kind of complex like Göbekli Tepe. So, this obviously enthralled me. And in fact, I became more interested in this site than Göbekli, in all honesty. So I would go back there year after year, exploring every cave, every hill, every valley, to try and understand the significance of the site, its astronomical alignments, and what was going on, what its relationship was, obviously, with Göbekli Tepe. I would go there on my own, but also go with Hugh Newman, and eventually J.J. Ainsworth. We'd go there to explore as well. And then in 2018, we visited the site, and the family said, that they were going to survey the site in readiness for excavations that would begin the following year, 2019. And I didn't go there in 2019, and then obviously we had the lockdowns. So I didn't really even think about it. And then in September 2021, they finally released what they had been discovering at Karahan Tepe for 3 years now. And when I saw this, I thought, oh my God. I mean, it was just this huge complex. I mean, you've been there, you've seen it. And I mean, I'm calling it almost like a lost civilization, a lost city of the Anunnaki now. I mean, quite a grand title, but I mean, it almost feels that way. And I actually think it could be more important than Göbekli Tepe itself, because what's going on at Karahan Tepe seems to be far deeper, far rawer, far more complex than what is happening at Göbekli, because what you see there are rock cut enclosures, literally cut out of the bedrock. It's the earliest rock architecture anywhere in the world, certainly, officially. And I mean, one of the enclosures, which is right behind you as we speak now, is what we call the Pillars Shrine. And this is cut vertically down into the bedrock, leaving in position 10 pillars that are slightly phallic in appearance, plus an 11th one that's sticking up, that looks very serpentine in nature. And on the wall, actually facing into the, or coming out of, I should say, the actual hill itself, is this enormous human head.
Yes.
You know, as much as 3 times the size of a normal human head.
Yep.
And it's on the end of a very long serpentine neck that's got like striations across it. And I mean, it's clearly serpentine in nature. Even the archaeologists, talk about it as being so. You know, it looks like it's literally coming out of the actual hill itself, and I don't think that this is a coincidence or by accident. And I mean, when you look at this shrine, this is only one of 3 interconnected, subsurface shrines. There is that it almost looks like the shape of a snake itself. In fact, I overlaid the head of a Anatolian meadow viper, which is a poisonous and indigenous species to the Teknek Mountains, actually on top of that, and it fitted perfectly. So what that shrine is a 3-dimensional representation of a snake head. And it's even possible that in an abstract form, the pillars coming out of the bedrock are actually the fangs of the snake itself.
Wow.
And in other words, they went to all of this trouble to create what appears to be a 3-dimensional head of an actual snake. And the only way that you would have got into it, and we do think that there was a roof on the top of it, is through a small porthole. And you have to virtually climb through it and slide down into it. So you're inside inside the shrine itself, which, if it is the head of a snake, why would you want to go inside the head of a snake? Why would you want to be in the mouth of the serpent itself?
Right.
And I think the idea is that you're meant to be consumed by this creature in the same way that we know that vultures were used to consume the flesh of dead bodies during the early Neolithic. I mean, the bodies basically would be put out on high places. The vultures would come down. They would consume the flesh, possibly take away the smaller of the bones. And then they would fly away. And because of which, it was seen that when the vultures ate the flesh, that they were taking in the soul, the spirit of a person that was then being taken away off to the afterlife. So the vulture itself became a symbol of what's known as a psychopomp in Greek myth, which is basically the soul carrier or the soul accompanier that takes and accompanies a soul into the next life. Well, looking at snakes, it seemed to be something similar was going on, certainly on a symbolic level. You had to be consumed by this snake to become at one with the snake. So what was this snake? Now, there are snakes everywhere at Karahan Tepe. They're crawling up the sides of pillars. They're on the sides of benches. They're carved into the bedrock itself in abstract form. And as I said, even the pillar shrine itself seems to be a 3-dimensional head of a snake. So, what I imagined was that rites were going on here where people were quite literally becoming possessed by a snake, and that they were delivering oracular communications, very similar to the oracle at Delphi, where you had these female priestesses called Pythia, or the oracle, that would sit on this tripod-shaped seat, and they would be intoxicated by the fumes that would come up from below from a dead serpent, a dead snake that was supposedly killed by Apollo. And what would happen is that they would become possessed by Apollo himself. But we're not talking about some shining sun god here. we're talking about Apollo as a snake, and Apollo would enter in them as a snake, and they would then give pronouncements that could decide the fate of kings, of kingdoms, and even the gods themselves.
Right.
And I think that something similar was going on at Karahan Tepe. But then the question becomes, what was this snake? Was it something that was simply, in their minds, or was there a real entity out there somewhere that was associated, with a cosmic serpent?
Right.
And the clue comes from the fact that these shrines at Karahan Tepe are aligned towards the solstices. My good friend, Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth, they discovered this incredible alignment of the midwinter sun. A thin pierce ray of light will go in through the porthole stone of the pillar shrine and hit that big head.
Wow.
On the winter solstice, a few minutes after the sunrise. So we know that that's connected with the winter solstice. Well, the shrine next to it, the pit shrine, which has this huge, deep, hole in the middle of it for no apparent reason, that's aligned to sunset at the summer solstice, so 6 months later. And you could actually stand in this enclosure and look directly at the sun on this moment. But what's so interesting, I mean, that these are incredible in their own right. I mean, these are arguably the oldest solstitial alignments in the world, certainly, again, officially. But if you waited for 2 hours until it got dark, you would behold an incredible wonder, because where exactly the sun has just set, the Milky Way would be seen to rise vertically up in the sky.
Wow.
And you would see this dark area between it, which is known as the Dark Rift, or the Cygnus Rift, which has been seen by many ancient cultures as the road or river into the sky world. And right at the base are the stars surrounding something known as the galactic bulge. Now, the galactic bulge marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy. And if you look at the ring or band of the Milky Way, if you were able to see it in 360 degrees, the brightest part is the galactic bulge. In the past, it would have seemed almost like a sort of light bulb in the sky. And it was this that these people seem to focus on. And I began to realize that the snake that they were venerating was the Milky Way itself. And in many ancient cultures, the Milky Way is seen as a snake. It's in Mesopotamia, it's in Vedic tradition in India, it's in North America, it's in Mesoamerican tradition, the Maya particularly, it's in South American tradition. Everybody sees it as a cosmic snake. It's also there in Greek tradition, in Norse tradition, and it's known as the world encircling snake. And one of the best images that we have of this is in Norse tradition, where you see images of the world tree, Yggdrasil, the ash tree, and the upper branches are in the sky world, the middle branches are in the middle world, and the roots are in the lower world, or the underworld. And you have the landmass of the earth, and around that you have the oceans, which blend into what is beyond those three worlds, which is what's known as the cosmic ocean, or the primeval waters of chaos, out of which everything emerged in the first place. So this Milky Way serpent seems to have been what these people were venerating. And the head is the galactic bulge. And the open mouth is the dark rift itself. And once you look at it and you realize this, it becomes difficult to unsee it, as it were.
That's amazing.
This is what I think the people there at Karahan were venerating. They were venerating the Milky Way snake, the world encircling serpent, as some kind of cosmic deity. And I find this quite interesting because, we know that this marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy. And what we know that is there is a supermassive black hole, which the astronomers call Sagittarius A star.
Mm-hmm.
And Rupert Sheldrake, the great free thinker of our times, has actually proposed that black hole, that supermassive black hole, is an intelligent being. It has consciousness, and it sort of tends its flock in the sense of, all of the matter within the galaxy itself is, for the most part, is spewed out by this supermassive black hole, they believe. So it's almost like tending its flock. It's like a localized form of God in a way.
Right. Yeah.
And I find that a very interesting concept. And is it possible, therefore, that these people at Karahan Tepe were somehow intuitively aware that there was some kind of higher intelligence associated with the center of our galaxy?
Yeah, that's just incredible. I mean, wow. I obviously, I've been there recently, just in September. We barely missed each other in September. I was there on a tour. Really my first time actually seeing Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe in person. And, pictures on the internet and Google and in books just can't do it any justice. You have to be there to see the magnificence of this site. And Karahan Tepe, when I turned that corner and I saw that face, it just blew me away. I've seen it before. I've seen you podcasts to talk about it, and Hugh Newman and JJ, but to see it in person, it's still like, it's mesmerizing. It's just an incredible thing. And one of the things I'm still trying to figure out, they try to say that the Neolithic people built this site. Is that your point of view as well?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely, but it's not that simple, really, because I think that there was a cosmopolitan society that were behind this high culture, this post Ice Age civilization, which the archaeologists, by the way, want to tell us is called Tash Tepala, which means the stony hills or the stone mounds. And the stone being because they use stone, to carve in stone to create these enclosures. And the hills actually are the occupational mounds in which all of these structures can be found, and which are almost like a layer cake of human activity. I mean, there's hundreds of them in southeastern Turkey. And so, so who are the Tash Tepala? Well, I think that it was local people, indigenous peoples to southeastern Turkey at the time. I think it was people that came down from the mountains, the so-called Zazian peoples that existed then. Plus, I think that there were peoples coming in from Western Turkey, from the Aegean, who were, using seafaring vessels to reach Cyprus to create and sustain whole, settlements and communities there. So they had these, seafaring capabilities. So I think they came into play. Plus, the X factor, if you like, are the people coming down from the north. They are the prime movers, the shamanic elite that we're talking about. And I think that they start their journey as far east as Siberia and Mongolia. Wow. And they use the Russian or the Eurasian steppe to reach the area just by the Caucasus Mountains, and then they come down into Anatolia. Others, I think, probably would have come via the Zagros Mountains coming in from the east. And they established themselves there probably around 10,000 to 10,500 BC, at a time which we know there was incredible cataclysms taking place in the world. The so-called Younger Dryas event is a 1,200-year mini ice age that gripped the northern hemisphere from around 10,800 BC down to 9,600 BC. And of course, 9,600 BC is when Göbekli Tepe was created. And of course, it's the time that Plato tells us that Atlantis was destroyed in one night of earthquake and floods. I mean, I don't think any of this is coincidence. It's quite clear that date marked the ending of this period and a chance for the world to go back to normal, if you like. And we also know that the beginning of this Younger Dryas event started with some kind of comet impact, probably a fragment of a comet going around the sun, comes out of the sun, starts to break up, goes into the Earth's atmosphere, breaks up even further into hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces that burn up, creating these air blasts that actually set alight large swathes of biomass in the northern hemisphere, from North America all the way across to the Middle East. In fact, we know that the closest one to Göbekli Tepe was about 150 miles away, at a site called Abu Hurayra, which is on the Euphrates. So, all of this was going on. So peoples were coming down into Anatolia and settling. We also know that peoples from Siberia and Mongolia were reaching the area of Anatolia as early as 11,000 BC, and they were going there regularly. This is brand new material, not even published in the journals yet. I mean, I know this for a fact. Watch out for this information. It's going to be really, really important, because it's going to show that there was a direct relationship between Siberia, Mongolia, and Anatolia at this time. But of course, as I said, the Younger Dryas event gets in the way of everything. People have to migrate south because they want to go to the warmer climate. So they end up in places like Anatolia. They probably go down into the Levant, the areas of Syria and Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, probably as far south as Egypt as well. But what's happening in the area of southeastern Turkey, particularly the region of Şanlıurfa, which obviously is focused around the city of the same name, is that they are creating these incredible structures with these T-shaped pillars, not just a few of them. Each of these sites, of which we now know that there's at least 12 Taş Tepeler sites, have dozens and dozens and dozens of these T-shaped pillars that occupy the areas of these enclosures. So it's not just Göbekli, it's not just Karahan. I mean, there's Sayburç, for instance, which is a few miles to the west of Şanlıurfa. We know that Şanlıurfa itself had a huge complex itself, Taş Tepeler 1. And there are other sites like Sefer Tepe, which is about 25 miles to the northeast of Karahan Tepe. And the archaeologists are working on all of these sites, and they're uncovering more and more and more of these T-pillars. Why would you want to do this? And I mean, the answer is, I think, that people were living in a state of fear. I mean, there's a visionary writer by the name of Barbara Hand Clone. She wrote a book called Catastrophobia, great book a few years ago. And the name of the book is basically what she said was the state of mind of the people at the end of the Younger Dryas people. They were still in a state of catastrophobia. In other words, they feared every time a comet came into the sky, they feared that more catastrophes would happen. And what I think happened at this point is that these prime movers, this shamanic elite, these mythical beings that we remember under terms like Anunnaki and Watchers and the Immortals, which is the term that's used in Iranian tradition. They're called the Giants in Armenian tradition. I mean, they all seem to refer to the same type of people, that they come into the midst of these other people who are referred to in the text as the mortals, basically. And these people are seen as shining beings. They're possibly incredibly tall. They have skin that seems to glow, eyes that seem to glow. Their faces are described as looking like vipers or snakes. And they come in and they take over the show. I mean, basically, they are shamans. They are probably priests. They are probably astronomers. And the people say to them, please, can you help us? And they say, look, no problem at all. We can sort it all out. We can make sure that no further catastrophes take place. We have connections with these supernatural creatures, these tricksters that come into the sky that cause this type of catastrophe. But for us to do this, you've got to help us. And that means creating these enclosures. And they've got to be done in a certain style. They've got to be orientated in a certain way. They've got to have acoustic properties. And we will ensure that they act as easy access into the sky world,
Mm-hmm.
and we will make sure that no further problems occur. But you must stick to what we say.
Yeah.
So for the next 1,500 years,
Mm-hmm.
these people create exactly the same style of buildings, exactly the same, and all in one region. They don't seem to go outside the region.
Yeah.
Yes, there are some traits of the Taş Tepe are found in central Turkey, in eastern Turkey, in Syria, for instance. But the actual T-pillars, as far as we're aware, were only manufactured and erected in the area of the Şanlıurfa province and yeah, the edges of that.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, this is 1,500 years. This is the amount of time that we've been creating churches in the same style, you know, creating an altar in the east with a cross on it and, you know, images of Jesus and whatever. I mean, why do we do that? Why do we create churches, for instance, you know, or mosques or synagogues or whatever? Why do we stick to the same style?
Right.
And, you know, why don't we turn them around and get them to face the south or the east,
Right.
the west or whatever? And the answer is because we fear that something bad would happen.
Yep.
Because we're superstitious. And I think that that's exactly what was happening with the Taş Tepe people. They believed they had to do this. And this is the only explanation, because coming back to your original question, is that, you know, these people were said to be hunter-gatherers. Yeah, they were. Now, the hunter-gatherers, what are hunter-gatherers? They're people that, you know, basically just go around foraging, following the herds, maybe on a 4-year circuit with their family, maybe a close social group, right? That's all they needed to do in their life.
Yeah.
So why would they suddenly want to all cluster together in an urban environments and spend all of their time creating these enclosures? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Unless there is a fear that if they don't do it, something bad will happen again. And that something bad is catastrophes, cataclysms. And I think that this is what happened for 1,500 years. They created these monuments, these enclosures, and then eventually they thought, why are we doing this? Actually, could somebody remind me why we're doing these?
Yeah.
And they said, oh yeah, it was a cataclysm. Yeah, but wasn't that 1,500 or 2,000 years ago, or however they would have, you know, referred to it? And they said, well, maybe we don't need to do these anymore. And then suddenly it just stops. So they then start moving into other parts of the ancient world in what's known as the Neolithic Revolution. And of course, that spreads into Europe, goes into the Indus Valley, it goes into China and, you know, everywhere. You know, obviously, it spreads outwards. And here's the interesting point. You know, obviously, you know, we share this interest in the Anunnaki. Who actually were the Anunnaki? Now, I obviously respect the fact that some people, you know, will see them as you know, space beings that came down here, you know, a la, you know, Zecharia Sitchin and his work. But the root of them is the Anunna. The Anunna is the original name for the Anunnaki. An Anunna was a Sumerian word which can be broken down, and it means basically possessed of the sky, or possessive of the sky, if it's broken down. Now, you can basically, you know, shorten that to sky people if you want. So who were the sky people? Now, again, obviously, some people may wish to see this as further evidence that they came down from the sky. My own view is that these people had knowledge of the sky, knowledge of astronomy, knowledge of cosmology, knowledge of the cycles of the heavens, you know, and obviously knowledge of how to deal with the sky creatures, you know, these tricksters. And the tricksters were basically animals, you know, like the coyote in North American tradition, whereas its counterpart at Göbekli Tepe is the fox. The fox is a universal symbol of a trickster in the Eurasian continent. And the fox's tail is a universal symbol of a comet, or a comet's tail. I mean, believe it or not, even to this day in heraldry, the sign for a comet is a fox's tail. I mean, they're synonymous with each other. If you can go all the way to China, and you can see the links between a canine and canine tail and comets, in very old illustrations, for instance. And of course, what we have on the stones at Göbekli Tepe is one's got a belt and a buckle that's got this 3-pronged thing on a circle that I identified in my book Göbekli Tepe: Genesis of the Gods in 2014 as a comet, a comet sticking up. I mean, just like it would be if the sun was just below the horizon and it was above it, and the 3 tails would be sticking vertically upwards. And just directly below this is a fox's pelt loincloth. And this also is a symbol of comets. In Mayan tradition, for instance, when comets came into the sky, people would be, would fear that a catastrophe was going to take place. And the Mayan priests would wear a fox pelt loincloth and do the rites and appease this, this creature in the sky to ensure that it didn't create a catastrophe. So in other words, these guys, these T-pillars, these huge T-pillars, right, which are at the center of enclosure D at Göbekli, are comet shamans. Ultimately, they are there to prevent these comets from causing, the problems in the sky. And I think that they would have had knowledge of comets as well. I mean, if they had all this knowledge of astronomy, they would know that certain comets were on short orbits, like, for instance, Halley's Comet, which is on an orbit of 76 years. I think it's 76. So, it wouldn't take them very long, a few generations, to work out that this one keeps coming back, for instance.
Right.
So, they could actually impress a community by saying, look, we are people of our word, because next year there will be a comet come into the sky and it will have 3 tails. And, you will know our word is true. And of course, suddenly it comes in and says, oh my God, these people, have this incredible foreknowledge. They can predict. And I think this is the way that they got them. And now Klaus Schmidt was the discoverer of Göbekli Tepe in 1994. I knew him. We had lots of conversations. And basically he wrote in his book, Göbekli Tepe, came out in 2012, incredible book, if you can get hold of it, that in his opinion, the T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe, particularly the central ones, which are much bigger, and the other ones are like the smaller ones, all facing towards the bigger ones, that he said that they represented the ancestors of the builders of Göbekli Tepe, and that they were the Anunna. That's the word he used. And what he cited is the fact that Göbekli itself was the home of the Anunna, or the Anunnaki. He talks about the so-called Duku Mount. The Duku Mount is it's been identified as an occupational mound, very much like Göbekli Tepe. I mean, there are academic papers saying this. I mean, I wrote them in my books. And he said that the mountain on which the Duku Mound, which is where the Anunnaki lived, was called Harsag. And he said that was, that area of Göbekli Tepe. That was basically the mountain on which, Göbekli Tepe was created. Now, obviously, he was writing this. He didn't know about Karahan. He didn't know about all these other sites necessarily. So I don't necessarily think you can pin it down to one mountain or one place. I think, you're dealing with a whole area now. And again, I go into this in the new book, because what the Mesopotamians tell us is that their origins and their gods came either from the north or from the northeast. And of course, if you're in Iraq and you're going towards the north, or you're going to the northeast, you'll hit the mountains. If you go north, you'll hit the Taurus Mountains. If you go to the northeast, you'll hit the Zagros Mountains. And they said it was beyond that the gods lived. Basically, in other words, the Anunnaki or the Anunna. I mean, they clearly say it. They actually give you a route of how to get there, and they said that you must cross the Kaaba harbour, which is a term for an area that's still there today in northern Syria. And of course, you do have to cross the Kaaba, what's known as the Kaaba Triangle, in archaeological terms, to reach the edge of the Taurus Mountains, and of course all the Tashtapala sites. So I think that all of this is correct. I think that, you know, these mythical beings were the divine ancestors of the people that created Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.